Continuing on with our mindset reprogramming here with the phase 2. In my most recent video, I talked about breaking down the perspective into 3 different focal points, past, present, and future, and explained how we can stop suffering through anxiety and worry and panic and stress by reprogramming our mind that it's not allowed to project a negative future. Well, now we're on to phase 2. By elevating our mindset and separating the 3 different focal points, the next easiest one after the future is the past, because it's already happened and we have time. We have time to ruminate, to process, to make a different kind of perception on those things that happen and to elevate ourselves into that peaceful state of being. So that's what we're going to focus on with retraining the mind now and releasing ourselves from a past perspective, which brings us down. Before I forget, my name is JhN. I'm a mindset and spiritual mentor or coach. And what I do is I help you to elevate your mindset so that you know a life of peace and abundance and happiness. And you stop thinking all those toxic thoughts. You stop feeling bad about yourself. You stop having the depression and the shame, the remorse and the anxiety and the stress and the worry. And you get to know some peace, for crying out loud. And within that state, you establish a foundation and you're really able to transform your life. So please subscribe if you're new. And if you're not, welcome to the channel, but also subscribe. And I look forward to speaking with you and hopefully helping you along your journey. I'm also an author, so check out Dreams of Antiquity, my debut novel. Over 30 5-star reviews on Amazon. So when we are trained on looking at our past and feeling bad about it, allowing those emotions to come through, what are the emotions that we're usually suffering from? This is not all the time, but typically we experience shame, guilt, remorse. We have resentment, animosity, grief, depression, sadness. We look at the past, at certain events, our own behavior, actions, choices, other people's behavior, actions, choices on how they treated us, or just an overall event or situation or circumstance, and we wish that it was different than what it was. It all boils down to attachment here. We are desiring for life to be other than what it is, and we're taking that desire and we're looking at our past and we're painting our past within that desire, but our past was simply just our past. It is our own perception of it that now in the present moment makes us feel horrible or like crap or demotivated, just empty and absolutely destroyed, and we need to free ourselves of that. The way we're going to do that is not going back and changing the past. We know we can't do that, but we can elevate our perspective of the past to come to a more peaceful state of being. So we have to program our mind that when it looks at the past and then makes us feel bad about it, it's not allowed to do that anymore. And so we need to do something. We need to really make some new laws and establish some new grounding here that when we do look at the past, we're going to change the way we perceive it. I noticed something about myself. I'd be sitting there all by myself thinking about the past and I'd feel horrible about it. I feel like I made this tremendous mistake and I'm sitting there beating myself up, and then all of a sudden it hits me. My ego, that thinking mind, is sitting there and taking a very specific event, and it is making me feel bad about not doing that, not making a different choice, not acting differently in that event that I could have done better. But that's always the case. We can look back in our past and there's infinite examples of opportunity to do that. That's not just. We're here now with hindsight, with more experience, with more growth, and a higher perspective. So of course we can always look back. So that can't be just. I saw that my ego was manipulating me to make me feel worse and bad about myself. And instead I realized that given my emotional, mental, physical, and spiritual resources in that past experience within the parameters of the circumstance, I was merely doing the best I could. If I would have been able to do better, I would have done better. The life would have turned out differently. That didn't happen. So that shows that I was navigating that episode, that event, as best I possibly could. But here I am judging myself for not doing it differently. That doesn't make any sense. I never experienced that same event in the exact same parameters before. So how would I have learned to do better? Basically, I elevated my perspective to look back and see that I was just learning at any given opportunity, any moment, any experience, any memory. I was just learning. And through that learning process, I stumbled and fell and I got back up, and I stumbled and fell and I got back up. But here and now, my mind is sitting there looking at that and judging me for falling. It's like, but that's what learning is. If you master it through and through, that's great. But usually it takes trial and error to become acquainted with something, to get a grasp on it, to grow through it, to learn the lesson of how to do better. That's all we're ever doing in life. And so if I could see that about myself, I can also see that about other people. They're just doing their best at any given moment. So anybody who maybe treated me poorly in the past, well, that was all they could do. And that was all they were made of. And maybe they're better now, maybe not, but I'm not gonna sit here and judge them for being less than. Then that's just my ego tricking me to feel better about myself because of my own insecurity. So I know I gotta release that too. So I'm looking back in my past and I'm seeing I don't need to do that anymore. That judgment is not fruitful for my own peace and presence here and now. And I don't need to even forgive myself, because if I sit here and say, well, you made mistakes and I forgive you for that, that means I messed up. That means, again, that's part of judgment. So I can't even forgive myself. I have to go above forgiveness, really go into honoring who I was, no matter what I did, no matter the experience, and allowing myself to know you did the best you could. And that an event was what it was, and it was fruitful. There was something you gained from it. And through the hardship and the challenge and everything, you were forced to grow. And that growth got you to this point here. So without me enduring that challenge, without me being treated that way, without me making the mistakes, falling down, stumbling, and standing up again, I would have never arrived to where I am now. So that past experience and memory was a step. And without that step, there would be a gap in my progression. I'd still be back down there. So now I look back and I've made this my law. I look back and honor myself at each step of the way. I love that man for what he endured and the growth and the lessons that I have now gained through his challenge. I love my former self, and I love the people in my life, just seeing that they too were doing their best, even if they were horrific, and even if I was too. I can't allow myself to have negative emotions and judgment and resentment and animosity towards that stuff, because all it is making me uncomfortable and upset here and now. It's stealing my peace, my vigor, my lust for life. It's giving me more anxiety about performance and putting a bunch of pressure on what I need to be accomplished in and make sure I'm successful. No, if I'm just learning then I'm learning now, which makes this life easier. I can stumble and fall. That's okay. I dust myself up. I know that I'm doing my best and I push forward. It's an easier way to live. So you have to make that same testament to yourself. It makes sense. You can't see it any other way. It is the most compassionate space to look back and perceive your past. And with it, you will liberate yourself of the depression, the animosity, the shame, the guilt, the grief, the resentment, those emotions that are bringing you down. If we look at our past differently, we don't suffer through those emotions as a byproduct. With all that said, we are now going to plug and play the steps. When you're sitting there, it's Friday night, you're on your couch, you're feeling bad about your life turning out the way it is. If only you did that one thing differently. Gosh, if you could go back in time and relive that, everything would be different. Your ego has no proof of that, no evidence. It's just saying if something was different in your past, life would be better now, but it has absolutely no proof to make that valid. It's just doing it to poke at you and to make you feel upset. And then with that new elevated perspective, we can free ourselves and say, you know what? No, I was doing the best I did, and that happened for good reason. And now let me take myself through these steps to free myself, center in on presence, and feel good about who I am and the life I am living. Step 1, observation. When you're feeling any of those attached emotions, the resentment, the grief, the depression, feeling that you made the mistakes, the lack of value, the animosity, any of that regret that is horrible and it just sticks with you, that's step 1, observation. Just notice that you are observing that from like a third person perspective. See yourself feeling those emotions, going through that little gauntlet of thought, and observe yourself processing that. Step 2 is reward yourself. You're literally going to say, I see that your mind has taken you and triggered you from the past events. Now we have the opportunity to center in on peace, and I'm grateful for it. Good job, Joe, for discovering this. Step 3 is center. Just like we described in our last one with programming the mind for the future, is 10 deep breaths here. While we're doing that, what are 10 things we see, 3 things we are touching, physical contact with, what are 2 things we hear, 1 thing we smell. While we're doing that, shoulders back, chin up, chest out, pick a point directly across the room, stare at it without blinking, and take 10 deep breaths using your diaphragm and only your nostrils. We are centering in on our salvation, which is the present moment. Within this present moment, we are liberated from the past and the future, and we are in a peaceful, beautiful state of being. But when our mind takes us outside of the present is when we suffer. Step 4 is to detect. What are we experiencing? Well, you're gonna go put your little detective hat on and go, well, what happened? Why am I upset? Well, I was thinking about the past and how I should have done something different, and then it gave me a bunch of regret and shame. Well, now we know. Those emotions that I mentioned are tethered to our perspective perceiving the past. So we know, okay, well, Joe talked about this in the video. I was looking back and I had that kind of negative perspective about myself, judging myself, thinking I should have done differently. But the advanced, elevated perspective is to love myself instead. So step 5 is you look back at that past event that you have the regret, the animosity, whatever it is that you're experiencing, and you ask yourself, what did I gain from that? Because there was a domino effect from that, which took you to where you were and you gained some stuff. That is real. What you didn't gain doesn't exist. That's not real life. That is attachment, looking at life for what it isn't. We need to look at life for what it is and come to presence and gratitude for exactly that. So ask yourself, what did I gain through that? And see that you were doing the best you possibly could, given your emotional, mental, physical, spiritual resources within the parameters of the circumstance. Love that version of yourself. They had to go through a gauntlet of suffering and challenge so that you could be where you are, having this high and mighty perspective, looking back, judging them. No. They put in the hard work, they went through the suffering, and you got the lessons. So we love them for that. We honor their trial, their struggle, and we love them for what they had to endure for us to gain. And you're going to realize that that is a liberated perspective. And we can look at any given moment in our past, no matter how horrific those things and memories may be. And we come to know that we're just doing our best. We were just learning through the choices that we made, and we need to honor that person and love them, because if anything, they need it so much more than we could ever even know. And we do know. So we pour that love and honor into them by looking back and not forgiving, but just loving them. I know that's a long-winded step, but this is very deep, traumatic stuff sometimes, so we really need to elevate our sacred space of energy and vibration here to hold on to that value, that perspective, that law, and pour that love into that person to ultimately come to that place of love. Step 6, think of 3 reasons you are grateful in the here and the now. There are things in your life, people, events, material things, circumstance, that you are pleased to have, that you appreciate. Think of those things and let that gratitude just wash over you. Close your eyes, take a deep breath, think of those 3 people, those things, the relationships, whatever it is, and just think of how much better your life is that you have those things in your life. What we're doing is we were suffering a negative emotional reaction to thinking about our past, And through centering and everything else, we came to neutrality, but we need to tip the scales and take ourselves above that neutrality or neutral space by coming to a positive, right? Especially in the beginning when we're reprogramming our mind, we need to tip the scales. So coming to gratitude, appreciation is that elevated vibration. So think of 3 things and let that appreciation wash over you. Step 7, affirmation here. I do not consider the past and judge myself or another. Instead, I honor and love myself and others for learning as best they could. You say that, you feel those words, that testament wash over you again, and you hold firm to that foundation. That is where you're at. And you come back to presence, and then you let it go, and you see how much difference it makes in your mind, in your heart, and the way you feel. If your mind tries to steal you back into that negative space, that's okay. Plug and play those same steps and repeat. It takes some time to reprogram anything, let alone our own mind, who has been kind of acting under the same conditioning for years and years, if not decades. So just plug and play, and you will find that you have come to this beautiful state of peace instead. And it will take some time, but once you gain some momentum, you're gonna feel a lot better about your past. Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit me up if you have any questions. Be sure to subscribe and tune in for part 3, where we're gonna master the present moment and elevate our mindset. Thank you guys. I'm grateful for you.